All right, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really going to get our hands dirty with this one, diving deep into knowledge maps.
Ooh, knowledge maps. I love those.
Yeah, they're pretty cool. And, over the last 12 years, researchers have been doing a ton of work trying to understand how these visual tools can actually help us learn better.
Yeah, that's super cool.
Yeah. So our main source for this deep dive is going to be this huge review article. It's called Knowledge Maps as Scaffolds for Cognitive Processing.
Gucci.
Yeah. It's
I like it.
by O'Donnell, Dansereau, and Hall. It was published way back in 2002, but still a lot of really relevant stuff in there.
Yeah.
And our goal today is really to pull out the most important insights about why these things work, who benefits the most, and how we can make them even more powerful for all of us.
That sounds like a solid plan.
Yeah, let's do it. All right, so to kick things off, maybe we should start with just what exactly is a knowledge map? Because I think a lot of people might have different ideas about what that means.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And the researchers in this article, they're actually very specific about how they define knowledge maps. So they talk about them as being these node link representations. So picture bubbles or boxes, those are your nodes, and each one of those holds a key idea or concept. And then those nodes are connected by lines, those are the links, and those lines have labels on them that actually spell out the relationship between the ideas.
Okay, so it's not just randomly drawing lines between things. It's really about
Exactly.
being specific about how those things are connected.
Yeah, it's not just a pretty picture. It's, is this a part of that? Does this one influence this other one? Is it a type of something? And those specific labels, that's really what sets knowledge maps apart from just any other kind of visual organizer.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's jump into one of the big questions here.
Right.
Knowledge maps versus just plain old text. Does it actually make a difference?
That is $1,000,000 question, right?
Yeah, and luckily this review has tons of research to help us answer that.
Oh, good.
And one of the really consistent findings that comes up over and over again is that when students learn using a knowledge map, they tend to remember the main ideas, way better than if they just read about it in a textbook or something. And they point to a bunch of studies, Hall et al. They did some work in 92 and 99. Rui and his colleagues in 89 and 91. All these different teams found this same advantage for knowledge maps in remembering the core stuff.
Okay, so it's not just one weird study. It's
No,
the pattern.
it seems to be pretty solid.
Yeah.
But what's really interesting is okay, they're better at the big picture stuff. But when it comes to remembering the tiny details, it's generally about the same, whether you used a map or just read the text.
Oh, so I see. So it's not a magic bullet for everything.
Right.
It's more about getting that overall structure.
Exactly. Yeah, it seems like the visual organization really helps you nail down that overall framework.
Whoa.
Now, another study by Rui and his team back in 89, they actually looked at how students study with these maps, individually versus in pairs. So, are you by yourself or are you working with a buddy?
Yeah.
And what they found is that the maps, they were really good at boosting recall, especially for those main ideas we just talked about.
So whether you're flying solo or with a partner, the map still helps you remember the big stuff.
Yeah, exactly. They even touched on what happens when the students who were studying together, with the map, they then had to recall information on their own.
Oh, so did it stick with them even when they weren't in that group setting anymore?
Exactly, yeah. That kind of leads us to this whole idea of cooperative learning. How does working together influence how well we learn with these maps?
Yeah, because two heads are better than one, right? So does that apply to knowledge maps too?
Well, there's this research by Patterson and colleagues back in 92. They really dove into this. And what they found is that students who were collaborating on learning, right? They were working together and they used knowledge maps. They remembered way more than students who collaborated, but they were only using text.
Oh, wow. So the map actually boosted the benefits of working together.
Yeah, it seems like the map, it's almost like it gives you a shared visual language.
Oh, I like that.
That makes it easier to discuss and really understand each other.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Because you can literally point to things and be like, oh, you mean this part.
Exactly, yeah. So we've talked about memory, we've talked about collaboration, but there's another piece here that's really interesting. It's not just about how much you remember. It's also about how you feel about learning.
Oh, right. Because if you hate it, you're not going to want to do it.
Exactly. So there's this study from 1996 by Hall and O'Donnell, and they found that students who use these knowledge maps, They actually reported feeling more motivated and like they could concentrate better compared to those who were just slogging through text.
So it's almost like the visual structure makes it feel less intimidating, more engaging.
Yeah, it's almost like the information just feels more like accessible to you.
Yeah, I could see that. Like text can just feel like this big wall of words, but a map is like more inviting.
Totally. And that actually ties in really nicely with some other findings from Reynolds and colleagues in 91. They were looking at like computer-based learning environments. So they had these things called hypermaps, which are like, digital knowledge maps.
Okay.
And they noticed that the students who were using these hypermaps, they were actually less frustrated compared to students who were just using regular hypertext.
So like those endless pages of links and text.
Exactly. So it seems like when you can actually see the information laid out visually,
Hmm.
it's just less overwhelming. You can kind of like navigate it more easily.
Oh, totally. It's like if you're lost in a city, a map is going to be way more helpful than just a list of street names.
Right, exactly. Okay, so there is one area where the early research kind of hit a snag. And
Ah.
this is in the idea of transfer. Like,
Hmm.
can you take what you've learned with the knowledge map and apply it in a different situation?
Oh, yeah. Because, like, what's the point of learning if you can't actually use it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the early work by Riwi and his colleagues in 89, they actually didn't see a lot of transfer from, like, studying maps in pairs to studying alone. But, thinking back on it, the review kind of points out that maybe this was because the students, they weren't really given any, like, instructions on how to actually use these maps effectively.
Oh, so it's like they were given a hammer, but nobody told them how to swing it.
Right, exactly. It's like you can give somebody a fancy tool, but if they don't know how to use it, it's not going to do them much good. And the later work by Patterson and colleagues in 92, they actually did find that with like proper training, students did start showing improvements with knowledge maps. But here's where things get really wild. Chmielowski and Dansereau in 1998, they found a positive transfer from knowledge map training to text study.
Wait, what? So, like, just by learning how to use visual maps, they got better at learning from regular old text.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
That's really counterintuitive.
I know, it seems like it shouldn't work that way. But they found that students who'd been trained in like how to create and use these knowledge maps, they actually recalled more of the main ideas from text even when there were no maps around.
So it's almost like it trains your brain to, like, see the structure even when it's hidden.
Yeah, it's like learning to spot the key arguments in a conversation even if you're just listening to someone talk.
Oh, that's a good analogy. I like that.
Okay, so we know these knowledge maps, they're generally a good thing, especially for getting a handle on that big picture structure of the information.
Right.
But how can we make them even more awesome? How can we make them even better for learning?
Yeah, like, how do we supercharge them?
Exactly. And the review actually points out two main strategies here. One is about teaching people like specific ways to process the information in the map.
Okay.
And the other is about designing the maps themselves in a more strategic way.
So, like, both how you use them and how you build them.
Exactly. So let's start with those processing strategies.
All right, let's do it.
The research really points to like active engagement being key here. You can't just passively look at the map. You got to work with it.
Mm-hmm.
And two strategies that come up again and again are summarizing and annotating. So for summarizing, like Hall and colleagues in 1999, they had students use just the spatial layout of the map, like not even the actual content in it, just the boxes and lines as a framework to like build a summary.
Oh, interesting.
And that really seemed to help them grasp the information.
So it's like using the map's structure as a scaffold for your own understanding.
Exactly. And then for annotating, there's a study from 1997 by Moreland et al. And they really emphasize using like specific annotation techniques that are designed for these knowledge maps.
So, like, not just highlighting everything, but really being strategic about the notes you take.
Right. Maybe you're like writing down connections between ideas or adding your own examples, things like that.
I like that.
Now, when it comes to designing the maps themselves, the review actually talks about using some principles from Gestalt psychology. Have you ever heard of that?
Gestalt psychology. Yeah, it rings a bell. It has to do with, like, how our brains perceive things visually, right?
Exactly. It's all about like how our brains naturally organize visual information into these like meaningful patterns.
Oh, right, like those optical illusions where you see two different images depending on how you look at it.
Exactly. And there are a few key principles that come into play here for designing really good knowledge maps. They are similarity, proximity, and good continuation.
Okay, break those down for me.
All right, so similarity means that we tend to group things together that look alike.
Okay, that makes sense. Like if you have a bunch of shapes, you're going to see the squares as a group and the circles as a group.
Exactly. Proximity means that we see things that are close together as being related.
Okay, so like if two nodes are really close to each other on the map, you're going to assume they're more connected than two that are far apart.
Exactly, yeah. And then good continuation. This is the idea that we prefer to see smooth, continuous lines and patterns rather than like abrupt breaks or changes in direction.
Okay, so like a nice flowing line is better than a jagged one.
Exactly. And the research actually backs this up. Backman et al. In 1992, they actually compared maps that were designed with these Gestalt principles to maps that weren't.
Oh, really?
And the maps that use those Gestalt principles led to better recall.
So using those visual cues that our brains are already tuned into actually makes a difference in how well we remember the information.
Totally. Wallace et al. In 98, they actually found a similar result. They found that enhanced maps, ones that used like shape and color to show similarity and spatial grouping to show proximity, they were way more effective than just a basic like web map.
So it's not just about throwing information onto a page, it's about intentionally using visual cues to help our brains organize it.
Exactly. Now, the review also touches on this idea of the format of the map itself. So, we can have a whole map where all the information is on one big page,
Okay.
or we can have stacked maps where the information is kind of broken down into these smaller interconnected maps.
Ooh, stacked maps. Those sound cool.
Yeah, they're pretty neat. And they often have like a little overview map at the beginning to show you how all the individual parts connect to the whole. And Wiegmann et al., back in 92, they actually looked at these different formats.
Oh, really? And what did they find?
Well, they found that the best format can actually depend on your, like, cognitive style, how you tend to process information.
Oh, that's interesting. So one size doesn't fit all.
Exactly. So there's this thing called field independence. And basically, field-dependent learners, they tend to see the big picture first. They're more influenced by the surrounding context.
Okay.
And they did better with those whole maps.
Mm-hmm.
But then field-independent learners, they're more, like, analytical. They focus on individual elements.
Okay.
And they actually learn better from the stacked format.
So it's like knowing how your brain likes to organize information can help you pick the best map format for you.
Exactly. Now, what about the links themselves? Those lines that connect all the different ideas. Does the way they look actually make a difference?
Good question. I mean, a line's a line, right?
Well, Wiegmann et al. They investigated this too.
Yeah.
And they compared plain links, just a simple line, to these embellished links. And the embellished links, they had things like arrowheads to show direction, labels to actually, like, say what the relationship is, and different line styles.
Oh, fancy.
I know, right? And what they found is really interesting. Students who had lower verbal abilities, they actually tended to do better with those plain links.
Oh, interesting.
But students with higher verbal abilities, they did better with the embellished ones.
Huh. So it's almost like the extra visual information in the embellished links was helpful for some, but overwhelming for others.
Exactly. And the researchers think that maybe those extra visual cues in the embellished links, they kind of emphasize the meaning of the relationships, which could be too much for someone who struggles with verbal processing. But for someone with strong verbal skills, it's just like reinforcing those connections.
Right. It's like for some people, it's just noise, but for others, it's helpful reinforcement.
Exactly. Okay, last thing about enhancing these maps. The review talks about the difference between animated maps, which are like built step by step during a presentation,
Okay.
versus just like static maps that are just there all at once.
So like one piece at a time versus the whole enchilada.
Yeah, exactly. And Blankenship et al. In 1999, they actually found that the animated maps led to better learning compared to those static ones. And they think it's because seeing the map built gradually helps you follow the flow of information more easily. You kind of build your understanding piece by piece.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. It's like you're not bombarded with all the information at once. You get to digest it bit by bit.
Exactly. Okay, so we've talked about how to make the maps themselves better, but let's talk about who actually benefits the most from these tools.
All right, let's get into that.
And one of the really big takeaways from this review is that students who have lower verbal abilities or skills, they seem to get huge advantages from using knowledge maps.
Oh, that makes sense. Like if you struggle with processing language, having a visual aid would probably be super helpful.
Exactly, yeah. And this is something that comes up a lot in the research. Dees, O'Donnell, Rewe, They all did studies showing these benefits.
So it's not just like a hunch, it's like a solid finding.
Yeah, it seems like it's a pretty reliable pattern. And really, at all, their 1992 study that we talked about earlier, the one about cooperative learning, they found that, for these students with lower verbal abilities, the maps actually help them learn better in those group settings.
Oh, wow. So it's almost like a double benefit for them.
Exactly. It's like the maps are helping them individually, but then the group setting is also amplifying the benefits of the map.
So it's like a win-win.
Totally.
Right.
Now, another study by Patterson et al. In 1993, they actually found that these students with lower verbal abilities who are taught using a knowledge map in a cooperative setting, they actually outperformed students who learned from text on tasks that involved, like, recalling information and filling in blanks.
Ooh, so they were actually doing better than their peers who were just using text.
Yeah, which is pretty amazing. Although it's interesting to note that this wasn't the case for multiple choice questions.
That is interesting.
I know. Now, what about students who have, like, higher verbal abilities? Do they see the same boost from using maps?
Yeah, I'm curious about that too. Because, like, if you're already good with words, does the map even matter?
Well, in that same Patterson et al.
Yeah.
Study, they actually found that the performance of students with higher verbal abilities, it didn't really differ that much whether they used text or a knowledge map.
Oh, so it seems like the maps are providing like a really helpful scaffold for those who might struggle with purely verbal information,
Yeah,
but they're not necessarily hindering those who are already strong with language.
exactly. And the review also highlights how these maps can be super helpful for learners who might have, like, specific challenges with processing text. So they talk about deaf students and students who are learning English as a second language.
Oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense because, like, if you're not fluent in the language of the text, or if you can't hear it, a visual representation will be way more accessible.
Exactly. So there's this 1992 study by O'Donnell and Aidan Walla. They looked at deaf college students in a biology class, and they found that using knowledge maps really helped them improve their recall and how well they did on, like, multiple choice tests.
So it's like the visual representation is bypassing some of the difficulties that come with, trying to process those written or spoken words.
Exactly. And there's a similar study from 1994 by Amara, who worked with Egyptian students learning English as a second language. And in their college science courses, he found that knowledge maps helped these students write much better summaries compared to just underlining the text or being in a control group.
So across different languages and learning styles, the maps seem to be a real asset.
Totally.
Yeah.
So why are these maps so helpful, especially for people who might have lower verbal abilities? The review kind of suggests that it's because they emphasize the overall structure of the content, the macro structure that we talked about earlier,
Right.
and they encourage a more top-down approach to processing information.
Could break that down for me. What does top-down processing mean in this context?
So basically, by visually laying out all the main ideas, right, and showing how they're connected, the map gives you this framework that can make complex information way less scary.
Oh, I see. So instead of getting lost in all the details, you see the big picture first, and then you can kind of fill in the gaps.
Exactly. And Chmielewski and Dansereau's 1998 research really supports this idea. They suggest that the maps help you see the forest for the trees.
I like that.
Now, there's another interesting study by O'Donnell from 1994, and he looked at how the orientation of a map, whether it flows from top to bottom or left to right, can actually interact with different types of learning tasks.
That sounds really nuanced. Like the direction the map flows in actually matters.
Yeah, it seems like a small detail, but it can have a real impact. And what they found is that while maps are generally helpful, you can actually reduce those benefits if the organization of the map is too similar to how information is processed in, like, regular text.
Oh, that makes sense. If you're already struggling with processing linear text, having a map that's laid out the same way isn't going to help you that much.
Exactly. It's like it's not offering you a different way of thinking about the information. Now let's talk about prior knowledge. Like what you already know coming into a topic.
Right, because like your existing knowledge base is going to influence how you learn new stuff.
Exactly. And there are a bunch of studies in this review that really dig into this connection between prior knowledge and how we learn from these maps. So one interesting study from 1992 by Lambiot and Dansereau, they looked at students learning from a biology lecture. And they found that students who had, like, low prior knowledge about biology, they actually benefited the most from having these knowledge maps to go along with the lecture.
Oh, that's interesting. So the map was giving them like a structure they didn't already have.
Exactly. But here's the surprising part. The students who already knew a lot about biology, they actually did better with just a list of key terms.
Wait, really? So having the map actually hurt them?
Well, the researchers think that for those students who are already experts, the structure of the map might have clashed with their existing mental models of the information.
Oh, I see. So it's like they already had a system and the map was just messing it up.
Exactly, like you're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. And Lambiot et al. In 1993, they actually found a similar thing with students' learning statistics. The learners who weren't really confident in their stats skills, they benefited from the maps, but the ones who were already confident, they did better with just lists.
So it's almost like if you already have a strong foundation, the map might be redundant or even counterproductive. But if you're starting from scratch, it can be really valuable.
Exactly. And O'Donnell in 1994, he did a study where students had to search for specific information within a knowledge map.
Okay.
And he found that having both strong prior knowledge of the topic and a good vocabulary were really important for being able to find the information quickly.
That makes sense. Like if you know what you're looking for and you understand the terms being used, you're going to navigate the map more efficiently.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But here's the interesting part. If you had a good vocabulary, but you didn't have that underlying prior knowledge, you actually performed about the same as someone with a weaker vocabulary.
So it's not just about understanding the words, it's about understanding the concepts behind them.
Exactly. You need that conceptual framework to really make sense of the map. And then there's a study from 2000 by O'Donnell and Dansereau that looked at two different subjects, the autonomic nervous system and probability theory.
Okay, two very different things.
I know, right? And what they found is that because students had different levels of prior knowledge for these two topics, the effectiveness of the knowledge maps, like how much they helped to recall an organization, it actually varied.
So again, it's like the impact of the map depends on what you already know.
Exactly. And finally, the review goes back to this idea of field dependence and field independence.
Oh, right, those cognitive styles we talked about earlier.
Yeah. And they bring in a 1998 study by Chmielewski et al. That looked at this Gestalt principle called common region in map design.
Okay, remind me what common region is again.
So it's basically about grouping related elements together within a clear visual boundary.
Okay, got
And
it.
what they found is that field-dependent students, those who tend to see the big picture, they actually did better with maps that use this common region principle.
Oh, interesting. So it's like having those clear visual boundaries help them chunk the information.
Exactly. But the field-independent students, who were more focused on details, they actually did better without that grouping principle.
Huh. That's so cool. So it's another example of how the design choices in a knowledge map can really impact different learners in different ways.
Totally. Okay, so we've covered a ton of ground here. We've talked about what knowledge maps are, how they work, who they benefit, and how to make them even better. But, research is never really done, right? There's always more to explore.
Right, the deep dive never ends.
Exactly. So the review actually outlines several directions for future research in this area. What are some of the big questions that researchers are still trying to figure out?
Well, one thing they're really interested in is figuring out which types of knowledge are best suited for, like representing in map form. So, for example, is procedural knowledge, like the steps in a process, is that better conveyed through a map than declarative knowledge, which is more about facts and concepts?
That's a really interesting question. Like a step-by-step process, you could probably map that out pretty easily in a linear way.
Yeah, like a flow chart or something.
Exactly. But a network of interconnected ideas that might need a more web-like structure.
Ah.
And O'Donnell et al., way back in 1990, they actually started exploring this, suggesting that different mapping strategies might be better for different kinds of information.
So it's like matching the tool to the task.
Exactly. Another really interesting area for future research is this whole question of cognitive load. How much mental effort is it taking you to process information?
Right. Because we often assume that maps help reduce cognitive load, especially for language learners.
Yeah.
But we need more research to really know for sure.
Exactly, yeah. And then we need to figure out how to design maps that really maximize those benefits.
Yeah, how do we make them as brain-friendly as possible?
Totally. And Barr and Dansereau in 2000, they did some really cool work on using split nodes in maps.
Split nodes, what are those?
So it's imagine you have a node that represents a word in English.
Okay.
But then right next to it, you have another node that shows the same word but translated into, like, Spanish or French.
Oh, I see. So you're seeing both languages side by side.
Exactly. And that can be super helpful for someone who's learning a new language. It's reducing that cognitive load of having to constantly translate in their head.
Oh, that's clever. I like that.
And then another big area for future research is the role that knowledge maps can play in, like multimedia and hypermedia environments, like online learning platforms, websites, things like that.
Yeah, those can be tricky to navigate, especially if you have like low prior knowledge or if you're not that tech savvy.
Exactly. So these maps, they could actually be really valuable as like navigational aids in these digital spaces. And there's some early research by Hall et al. In 2000, last et al. In 2001, that suggests this might be a really promising direction.
So it's like using maps to create a roadmap for learning in the digital world.
I like that. And remember those positive transfer effects we talked about earlier?
The ones where training with knowledge maps makes you better at understanding text.
Yeah, exactly. That's another area that researchers want to explore further. Does this transfer extend to like higher order thinking skills? Like, can it make you better at analyzing information or solving problems?
Oh, wow. If that's true, that would have huge implications for education.
Totally. And there's some early work on concept mapping by Bukola in 1990 and Wallace and Mintzes in the same year that hints that this might be the case, that these visual mapping techniques can actually help you understand complex concepts on a deeper level.
That would be amazing.
I know. Okay. One last thing about future research, and this one is kind of unexpected. The review talks about using knowledge maps in, get ready for it, counseling for drug abuse.
Wait, what? That's so interesting. I would never have thought of
I
that.
know, right? It's a really cool application. And Dan Serow and his colleagues, they've been doing a lot of work in this area. And basically what they do is they have counselors and clients work together to create these knowledge maps that visually represent the client's problems, the things that are contributing to their addiction and their plan for recovery.
So it's like a visual representation of their journey.
Yeah. And it's really about like empowering the client to like take ownership of their recovery.
That's really powerful.
I know. And the research in this area is actually showing some promising results. Clients who are in counseling sessions that use these maps, they report feeling better about the therapeutic process, they have more positive emotional responses to the treatment, and they even have better outcomes in terms of reducing drug use.
Wow. So it's not just about like understanding information, it's about understanding yourself and your own challenges.
Totally. And the review actually suggests that this approach could be applied to other areas too, like peer counseling and conflict resolution.
Oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I know, right? And then thinking about these co-created maps in counseling, it kind of raises another question for future research. How do maps that are self-generated versus maps that are created in a group versus maps that are provided by like an expert, how do they compare in terms of their impact on learning?
Oh, that's a good question. Like, does it matter who makes the map?